Welcome to Monday Night Chat Show. Today we're going to talk about cultures and cultural negotiations and things we need to understand about cultures, particularly Brits like me when we go overseas. I've actually spoken in 32 countries and I've been privileged to travel around the world, and one or two rather strange things happened to me. I remember I was teaching in Dubai and I went up to this Muslim lady in the burqa and everything else, and I went to shake her hand. She put me straight back in my place and said, "Derek, I'm sorry, we don't shake hands." And I got very embarrassed at that point. I should have done, because she let me down very, very carefully. I was in Australia. I flew to Melbourne. I was jet lagged. I asked if I could have a lower room in a hotel, a 42-story hotel. They gave us a room on the top. I said, "Could I have a lower room, please?" And the lady said, "I suggest you don't look out the window." I thought she was joking. No, she meant it. That's the sort of reaction sometimes you get in Australia. In Estonia, I spoke in Estonia and I didn't get any reaction from the audience. It was only afterwards I learned that people in Estonia are very polite. They won't ask questions, but afterwards they came up to me and said it was a wonderful talk. I was thinking I probably should have left at the break because I was bombing and going down really badly. Tonight, I've invited a few people who have experiences of communicating, negotiating, doing business in different countries. And I'm going to ask them to just consider on the first round, and the first round we'll just consider customs others should know and traditions. And we're going to go straight over to Tim from Texas, just outside Dallas. And Tim, if you're there, could you tell us a little bit about Texas traditions and perhaps US traditions? I know Texas traditions are a little bit different sometimes from the rest of the USA. Tim,
well, that's true. Well, thank you. I'm very glad to be here, Derek. Yes, Texas is a little bit different than the rest of the United States. It is the only state that was entered by treaty. All other states were annexed. Because it came in on treaty, it insisted that the flag will never fly lower than the American flag. It's the only state flag that is allowed to fly at the same height as the American flag. In terms of customs, relative to business, the American business environment now is gender-free. That means that what used to be more accommodating behavior is no longer, between genders, is no longer true. For example, it used to be that women would not shake hands, not Muslim women, but women would not shake hands. Well, women definitely shake hands now. It used to be that men would stand when a woman would come in the room. Everybody stands when somebody senior comes in the room. That's a very big business custom. Another custom and a tradition that if you are traveling to the United States, I want to point out to you that it's likely that you'll be invited, or you may be invited to an event, be it a sporting event, a rodeo, a public event, where the United States National Anthem is played. And it is very important that you don't, you can sing along if you know the words, but it's not necessary for you to know the words. What is necessary, and what I would stress, is that like everybody else, you stand during the national anthem of the United States. And if you're wearing a hat, especially if you're a man, you would remove the hat. You don't have to put your hand over the heart. You don't have to do anything. But if you do stand and recognize the national anthem of the United States, you will gain incredible amount of goodwill, not just from your host, but from everybody around, because they will notice that. As you are aware, probably, the kneeling during the national anthem is a major news story, and it has been for several years. In my case, it's exercising free speech, but it just a little hint that if you're ever in an event in America where the national anthem is played, traditions, that's a big tradition. In terms of holidays, the biggest holiday in the United States now, and this has evolved, is Thanksgiving, which is the last Thursday in November in the US. And it is a holiday in which families get together and give thanks. Not give thanks for America, give thanks for being a family and being free. So that's grown to be a very big tradition.
Brilliant, Tim. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you in a minute, but we have to move on. Actually, what you said there is just being polite, isn't it? It's standing for the country's national anthem that in the country you're in. But I can see some people might not do it. It sounds a bit crazy to me, but
yeah, and if it just you just don't want it to be perceived as arrogance. Sure. If you don't stand, ignorance we forgive, arrogance we don't.
And when I've attended the national speaking conventions all over the US, I don't understand your sense of humor. So I'd like you to give us a session on that one day, because people are falling about laughing in conferences and I'm sitting there wondering what's going on. We're going to cross the pond now to Paris. If you're there, John Timms, can you give us a quick update for 2 or 3 minutes, what we should know about France?
Yes, indeed. Gosh, I go through your list, Derek. Customs. I think the most important thing when you're dealing with the French is to be polite. I think that's a key issue. If you know a few words of French, that would be appreciated. I think this is general terms, but the French are particularly sensitive to the way people show their appreciation of the French language. With regard to gifts, no, I would not recommend that. Remain neutral. No, gifts are reserved for close friends, within the family or close friends.
So not for business. Not for business. You don't take a little gift. Okay, that's very interesting.
No.
Some countries.
That might even be misconceived.
Okay.
That would not go down. No. How do people negotiate between hard and soft?
John, we'll come back to negotiate. I'd like to cover negotiation all the time. My perception is that the French try and play hardball at the beginning and then back off. But let me know if that's right or wrong. Certainly the 2 experiences I've had in Paris, there was a hardball negotiation going on. But actually, I'd like to switch to Murvet in Denmark now, if I may, Murvet, if you're there. I've met a number of Danish people, and they're very nice, very likable people. And I read that you have the highest tax rate in Europe, but I also understand that you have the highest health service and state looking after you, etc. Murvet, are you there?
I am here. I'm here, and I'm very delighted to be speaking tonight. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, we do have a very high tax rate, but we also do have a lot of privileges. In fact, I've been living both in Turkey and London, and I have to say that I moved back to Denmark following a tenure in London because the quality of life is much higher here. Danes, now, the version that you get from me is actually very good because I'm born here to Turkish parents. So I also see Danes a bit from the outside, knowing their customs and cultures from the inside. Danes, they would very much like to shake hand. And it's such an issue that before the pandemic, when people from outside the European Union, particularly Muslims, they were applying for Danish citizenship. It was a custom during the citizenship giving ceremony that they shook hands, and some of them refused to. And that was a huge debate, honoring the Danish traditions and honoring women and men as equal and so forth. I like to shake hands myself because the handshake tells me a lot about the other person. Is a handshake firm? Is it soft? Is it, are you present? So I like that a lot. And actually, that's one of the things that I miss during this pandemic and will miss over the next few years, because I think and believe that unfortunately we will have to wait and see what happens. And then another custom about Danes is they are not afraid of authorities at all. Years ago, I was working for an IT company, and it was one of my first weeks there. And I remember that I had a problem with my computer. So I went to the IT department, And just a few minutes after me, the CEO came in and he had huge problems and he was going to have a presentation. And then the guy just looks at him saying, you know, there's a queue. So if you just queue, I'll help you when it's your turn. So that was a very nice way of demonstrating how Danes perceive authorities. They don't perceive them as authorities, and yet they have done so during the pandemic, following order, so to speak.
Thanks, Murvet. And John's put in, he loves the Danish HYGGE tradition. I have no idea what that is. So can you clear that up for us now?
Hang on, I just have to see that. I love, the hugge. Oh, absolutely. That is one of the main things about Danish tradition. Hygge means it's cozy. So Danes are very good at, even during meetings at negotiations, like making sure that there are the right designs and everything is made comfortable for you. So it's very much about comfort. It's about sitting with a blanket, having some candlelit and some cookies and some coffee and so forth. Not during a meeting, obviously, but you will see that Danes, they care very much about their design, their interior, and how they present things. So during a meeting, you will find that a lot of the Danish officers, they are well equipped and they're very nice to look at.
Very good. Okay, we'll be coming back to you on the negotiations because I know you've worked as a lawyer in both the UK and in Denmark. So we'll be interested in some of your experiences there. I'd like to switch now to Gregor in Slovenia. Gregor, if you're there.
Yes.
It was Yugoslavia when I grew up, so things have changed a bit, certainly. In fact, I had a lovely holiday in Yugoslavia just after I got married.
Okay, so thank you, Derek, for inviting. So I would say that here in Slovenia, we don't have some special customs or traditions, but I would say being polite and showing respect is always good, yeah. So what you mentioned now, Yugoslavia, so it's not very good if you mix something Slovenia and Yugoslavia, because our country is this year 30 years old. So we are extremely proud to our 30 years history, and talking about Yugoslavia and so on, it's not very good idea, I would say.
Okay, well, I'll take a yellow card from Nigel on that.
So the other things is that we are also very, very proud to our high performance like Luka and other sportsmen, and talking about them as a beginner, as an icebreaker is also very good. And of course, knowing few of our words, because we are a small country, knowing, let's say, Ljubljana as the capital city or something, this will always help you.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's a good point that John makes about knowing a few words, absolutely crucial. I do remember having a lot of holidays in France, and on several occasions going up to someone and not attempting to say bonjour, madame, or whatever, and kind of got blank. But if you went bonjour, madame, ça va, or something like that, and that's all I know, you got an immediate greeting, really important. And Gregor, when we met, I think I was speaking at that conference in Ljubljana, and I stole a couple of words that I had no idea what they were.
I think you did,
fantastic.
Yeah.
Go, I think.
Fantastično.
Yeah, I told you I'm not really good at that. I just think it means fantastic, but
Yeah,
I got a good laugh, and I got a lot of rapport at the beginning of a six-hour talk. Thanks for that. We'll come back to the negotiations in a minute. Eva, are you there in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, New Mexico?
Yes, I am in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
And just to update everybody, Eva was born in Estonia, one of the Baltic states, and you went to America to study in a university, and you stayed there, didn't you? But your mum and dad were brought up under a pretty harsh communist Russian regime. Tell us a bit about both.
All right, I will start with Estonia. But one custom that outsiders should be aware of is that small talk at best is tolerated, and at worst it's considered rude. When you are in Estonia, get comfortable with silence. It's not a sign that they don't like you. It's a sign that they respect you and your privacy and your time. They don't want to take up any moments from deep thoughts that are going on in your head. any traditions. I think the greatest tradition in Estonia, the greatest holiday, is the Midsummer day. It makes sense if you think how dark it is for the better part of the year. So Midsummer Day, it's coming up in about a month here, is a huge celebration. When you travel that time, there will be people around. Most of them will all be tourists because Estonians are in the bushes somewhere celebrating. And gifts, I think gifts are okay and money is okay. Even in a business setting. I mean, you wouldn't go in with a suitcase full of money. Hey, I'm here for a meeting. But they tolerate gifts pretty well. And in a more personal life, if you go to a birthday party, cash and gift cards are welcomed for the most part. Estonians are very practical. In the United States, me not being aware, it's a no-no. They kind of, I mean, they're not going to say anything. Americans are so polite, but I know that it's a little bit offensive to them. But when I first moved to Savannah, Georgia to study there, and that's considered deep south in the United States, I was pulled aside a couple of weeks later and I was informed that it's rude to just march into somebody's office, say hi and get right to the point. You have to spend a little bit of time on how your weekend was and how's the weather, what we consider as small talk. So that was a big learning curve for me, for sure. And I agree with Tim. I think Thanksgiving is the up and coming holiday and tradition here. And I love, love, love Thanksgiving, a holiday that's really worth celebrating. And when it comes to gifts, I think they said, come with an actual item and not so much with money or gift cards here.
Okay, great. We'll come back to you on negotiation in a little while, but I think you told me that your uncle had never left the village that he'd been born in, and it was a little tiny village somewhere in Estonia, and he was horrified that you'd actually traveled the world.
Oh, absolutely. And he's asking me now with more and more vehemence, when is this American project going to be over? And
little does he know.
Little does he know, yes.
Okay, that's brilliant. Let's turn to Gabie and then let's turn to Mike. Gabie, are you there from, I know you were born in Gibraltar.
Absolutely. Hi there, guys.
You better tell one or two people how big Gibraltar is.
Gibraltar is 2.5 miles from the top of it to the bottom of it. It is a peninsula on the bottom end of Spain. It suffers from bigitis, so it believes it is a nation that is wonderful, and it even has, I know you'll appreciate this, Derek, its own football team that's in FIFA.
It is. No, you're right. You're right.
FIFA.
Yep. In the World Cup.
Well, in the World Cup, there you go, which just astounds me. So Gibraltar is very much based on relationships, and small talk is everything. Knowing how the family are doing and what's going on in the family is really, really important. And the small talk is key, actually. They tend to greet each other with kisses, hugs, embraces, and even informal meetings. So, you know, when I first went out there, I was working with a lot of solicitors and accountants, and I would always start off with a handshake, but by the end of the meeting, we would give kisses, and even blokes would do the same. You know, it's a bit like the Spanish. So for me, I know the Med pretty well. So it's the southern Spain, the southern France. They are very, very tactile. Versus the north, which is slightly different. So it's all about relationship. Very often meetings are around food and drink, and the same in Malta. You know, it's the Med, that whole. You would have a business meeting and it would move into lunch, or you would have a business meeting over lunch. So being able to think whilst eating and drinking, really important. Learning to eat with very small mouthfuls so that you can talk at the same time. Otherwise, they have the upper hand. And also having meetings outside around the swimming pool. or by the sea. So I remember taking a colleague once, and we were in sarongs, and she said, "What, we're meeting at the golf club, at the yacht club, and we're going swimming?" It's like, "Yep." "How are we going to do the meeting?" "I'll be in my swimming costume." It's like, "Well, you have to wear a sarong and you have to be happy and comfortable." So, you know, very, very, very different from what you would expect in many other places in the world.
Fantastic. And if we cross the border, and I do know an extraordinary situation when I played hockey there, where I was checked in at the airport, and we crossed the border, and I was having dinner in a bar in Spain, and I was getting very jumpy that we weren't going to get across the border to get on our British Airways flight back to Heathrow. So is it changed much at La Linea compared with Gibraltar?
No, it's just an extension. That time, their concept of time is very different. Often in professional meetings, I would always arrive on time because that's me.
Yeah.
But I would also be really chilled out, sitting there for 20 minutes, half an hour.
What, waiting for them to arrive?
Waiting for them to arrive.
Okay.
But equally, if it depends who's running the meeting, you know, sure. You kind of need to be there, but you've got to be prepared that they might be late.
Yeah. We'll be turning to the Middle East in a minute and to Mike, but I'm interested, how did the Gibraltarians, who is now a green country, we can go on holiday in Gibraltar, but we can't cross the border into Spain. How do they deal with no hugs and kisses and all that palaver?
So when I went out there in the middle of the pandemic, I didn't go over to Spain. For those reasons, I couldn't, and if I did, I wouldn't be able to get back home. But walking down Main Street, you know, people were hugging, but they were certainly, everyone was elbow nudging or, you know, not high-fiving, but whatever that is, fist pumping. Yeah, sure. So they were still very tactile in within the bounds that they could be.
Sure.
Very much they'd give virtual hugs because they really wanted to hug each other. It's just in their DNA, sure. In our DNA.
The last thing is that Gibraltar's been a British colony or independent territory for 350 years, hasn't it? Since we stole it off of Morocco, didn't we? Not even Spain or whatever treaty it was. But it's still very Spanish, despite the fact that 350 years has gone by, as it's been part of Britain.
Yeah, it's a real mix. I mean, it's one of the only places that I know, and I'm not particularly well travelled, where all the cultures from a religious perspective really work and respect each other. So there's a very strong Orthodox Jewish section, there's a very strong Hindu section, there's a very strong Islamic section. There are many more Buddhists now, that seems to be growing, and the yoga side of things is growing. The Catholics are almost Orthodox Catholics. And there's also Anglicans that seem to be, it was always there, but it seems much more prolific now. But they do a lot of multi-faith events. So it is that really, that it's all about embracing difference and respecting.
Fantastic. Mike, are you there? Because Mike Williams has run banks and done a lot of business in the Middle East and also in Japan. If you there, Mike, being on time, you don't need to be on time, do you, in the Middle East?
It actually helps. It depends. I think one thing I'd say about the Middle East is certainly in the UAE, the business climate there is a mixture of different nationalities, and actually that maybe a little bit like Gibraltar in a way, but a bit of a melange of GCC Arabs and Indians and subcontinentals and people from the Levant, from Lebanon and Palestine, and that makes life a little difficult in trying to work out the appropriate approach. But I think punctuality is important wherever. I mean, you know, it's inbred, isn't it, for many of us? And I think it doesn't hurt to show interest, but you have to be prepared, I think, for no shows and for late changes and for more pressing engagements, particularly when you're dealing with somebody relatively important. You know, dealing with a sheikh or two that quite often you'll find that, you know, they're summoned to the palace. You never know whether it's true or not, but actually you have to be prepared to be a little bit flexible in timing. Politeness is important. I mean, I think it's a given everywhere, but I think it's really important in the Gulf. Humility to a certain extent. I've said before on a couple of these things that there's a tendency, I think, for people to talk down perhaps to people and assume that, you know, if we're from the West, we know better than them, but clearly you have to respect their traditions and cultures. And on those traditions, I think there are certain things that are helpful. I'm talking about the Gulf. I'll perhaps touch on Japan a bit later if you want, but on the Gulf. So seating arrangements are important, recognizing that it's a very hierarchical environment, so that you have to show up the utmost respect for very senior people. And they have this thing with coffee, that at meetings, they'll come around with one of these sort of metal containers with Gabie, the coffee made with cardamom, and you'll have these little cups to drink it out of. And it's, unless you hate the stuff, it's polite to have one and then to ask for a refill. But before you have it, you should make sure that the person next to you has the chance to have it before you run. So there's this polite game you play and say, you go first, no, you go first, and it's this little ceremony almost. Not quite Japanese, but I mean, it's a very important part of the etiquette there. And then when you've had enough coffee, you just shake your cup and that stops them refilling it. So I've said before, I think observing how people perform in these environments is really important. And I think you pick it up as you go along, really. What I was going to say, gifts. I don't think gifts are particularly important, other than if you are invited to somebody's house for dinner or for something, for a reception. It's best to take a gift. You don't take a bottle of wine, I suggest. That probably wouldn't be a very good idea. But send flowers. I mean, I remember we hosted a reception when I was over there, and I've never seen so many bunches of flowers. We had to put them on the stairs. We had nowhere to put them. So it's just, it's a thing there. And of course, it's much appreciated and costs a fortune, but yeah, you have to do that. But those sort of things, people remember. And the other thing I would say is it takes a long time to build relationships there. When we come to negotiating, perhaps we'll touch on this, but you're not going to be people's best friend quickly. Small talk is a really important part of the etiquette there. So you'll spend time asking about, not too many intimate questions, but it's polite to ask about family. It's polite just to talk. Don't talk about the weather, because that's a tendency for all of us, isn't it? But you can, because it's going to be hot. Talk about find some common ground. Football is really popular there. So, you know, and they will all support one of the big teams. So, you know, just, you know, there's not many people support Arsenal, Derek, I'm afraid, but there's understandable reasons for that. So
I knew you were going to say that, Mike. I was just waiting for it.
I think that's probably it. I mean, I can come back to it a bit later.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Mike. Yeah. That's brilliant. I'm going to go around again now, but I'm conscious the clock is ticking. Like to know about negotiating, and you know, when I say negotiating, I mean presenting, pitching, selling, influencing, haggling, and the whole thing that goes around that interpersonal skills of doing business with people, getting on with people, having relationships. So I don't mind any of those bits that you pick out. I've got the bell with me, so I'll ring the bell after 2 or 3 minutes so we can go around and give everybody a chance. But also there's some people on the call who will have a lot of experience that I haven't brought in yet. So Tim, over to you. 2 minutes in Texas.
Well, I would say, generally speaking, Americans are bad negotiators compared to the rest of the world, compared to Asians, certainly compared to people in the Middle East, compared to South Americans, where it's a very fine art. But we do negotiate in a couple of areas. We negotiate when we're buying cars, or we try to, and we used to negotiate, or I guess we still negotiate in real estate, but it depends on the strength of the market, whether your buyers in the negotiating better negotiating person or whether it's the seller. Right now in the US, especially in my area, the worst negotiating position you can imagine is being a buyer, because people are paying full price, 40 bids on one house within a week is not unusual. The house next door to me was listed at a certain price, and somebody came in with $101,000 higher than asking price, cash, and they took the deal. So two big areas, car buying, but that's it. I'm buying window dressings. My wife and I are buying window dressings. The guy gives us a price. We don't ask him to go down. If we don't like the price, we say, is there something that might be a little bit less for this window or something like that? It never dawns on us to negotiate on furniture or home furnishings, anything like that. Clothing, if I buy a number of suits and shirts, I will ask for a tie or two. But if I just buy one suit, the price is the price. Now, that could be my failing, my personal, but relationship, it seems like we would damage the relationship if we ask for a lower price.
Okay, Tim, time up. Tim, we'll be back to you later. Thanks very much indeed. Now to France, to John, where I thought all French people were hardball negotiators. John, did I get that wrong?
Here we go. Yes and no. From my experience of international negotiation, the emotional side of negotiation is probably far more important than the rational side. And this leads me to the conclusion that some of the best negotiators are those that play on both sides of the coin in a very dynamic fashion. And I think I would rate the Chinese, probably the Brits, possibly also the French as top in the world as negotiators. Basically because there's a lot of dynamics going on between the emotional side of what is taking place within the negotiation and the rational side. When you look at the French, they are very gifted, particularly in the emotional side of negotiation rather than the rational side. Strange enough, because rationality was originally a French invention with Descartes, hence the adjective Cartesian. But this is the strange thing about the French. They are remarkably good in some areas where they think they are ignorant, and they are remarkably backward in areas where they think they're in the foremost. And this, I think, is part of the makeup of when you're dealing with the French in negotiation, which to other nationalities appears so difficult. In other words, when you negotiate with a different culture, you must have, in my opinion, a very deep and ongoing experience of that culture more than anything else, and the educational values that have gone into the educational culture of the people you're dealing with. In other words, get to know them intimately. Otherwise, you might make a mistake. Now, I think that's true of all cultures, but it's particularly true of the French, and I would say also of the Brits, and of course, very true of the Chinese and Japanese.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. Time up. Now to Denmark, that nice country, just with the Germans below them. Murvet, are you there? What's your view?
I am here. You know, I have negotiated with Germans, and I didn't particularly have any fun, because one of the key words for Danes is they like having fun, and they like having fun in negotiations. Danes, though they like having fun, they're actually not very good at small talking or small talks, which I didn't touch upon previously, but they're not. So they're very much to the point. They're so much to the point that it may come across as being rude, which they can be as well, but not as rude as the Dutch people, the way I see it. and they are not easily offended. They like to be very ironic and have fun and make jokes along. But when they meet you, the first thing, they'll shake hands and they'll go to the point, and then they like to have fun and a great dialogue during the negotiation process. I would say that they are fairly good at negotiation, to the point that they have become much better in acknowledging other cultures, which, I mean, I have seen a huge leap within the past 10, 20 years. They have really, really changed. EU has helped a bit, not to the better, I think, because within the EU, and I've actually worked in a Scandinavian company where I saw the difference between Danes and Swedes and Norwegian, which can be really, really huge. When I said that, yes, they are not very easily offended, so you can come a very long way in putting pressure on them, and they won't take it personally, which is a very good trait, I think. Some of them, I think that's down to your person as well. But some of them, they like being pushed to a degree where they actually get some takeaways and they learn from it. And they like to grow.
Thank you. And I know you're going to come back at some stage, because you told me that you negotiated the sale of a stake in an airline, didn't you, as well, at some stage?
Okay.
So thanks for that. And thanks for joining us today for the first time. I hope you can come and join us again. Now, where have I got to? I think we're going to Slovenia next, aren't we? To Gregor, unless I've got my list wrong.
That's correct, yeah. So, yeah, I would say that we Slovenians, we are somehow avoiders. So people do not like to negotiate. Usually they say, give me a proposal by email, especially not negotiate in person. Yeah, send me an email and I will check your proposal and I will call you. Of course, this call then never comes. Yeah, so you need to be very cautious, let's say, to be in contact with your guy on the other side to check what is the status of your offer and so on. So most of the time you will get this, that decision will be made before you will even get the real feedback, because because they don't like or they don't know how to negotiate, they don't even expect that somebody will negotiate with them. Yeah. So you must be careful. Yeah. If you give your offer, I would say you must give pretty good offer, because sometimes you will not get the feedback if your offer is good or okay, or they will call you back or they will not call you back. So we are also very competitive when it comes to the negotiations. So people want to win every time, yeah. And very rarely we go into the collaboration or to collaborative negotiations where we could find the good solution for both, yeah. Like Derek, you are saying win-win for all, yeah. But most of the time, at the end, we will split the difference, yeah, that nobody will be offended or something like that, yeah. So some days also some ego is coming in. So depends also on the people with whom you negotiate, let's say. So there are some people who got a lot of property or a lot of money, let's say, after the independence, and they can be very arrogant and egoistic, I would say. So if I can say, let's say, with the large international companies, so when you negotiate with them, so these are locals, but they think that they're always right because they work for a big international companies and they think that they always have to win and so on. So that's also a little bit, I would say, the background from the East European countries, yeah, like Eva was saying, yeah, that we were under not so much under the Russian influence, but I would say rather socialistic or communist influence. And I feel a lot of mistrust in these relationships and negotiations.
Thanks, Gregor, and I'll remember never to mention Yugoslavia again. And thanks for that tip. I'm learning a lot of information here. And for those of you that don't know where Slovenia is, it's a very interesting country, sort of jammed in between Austria and Italy, and also I'm not sure what's on the right-hand side. Hungary, I guess. Hungary. and a lot of different cultures historically from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, etc., etc.
Also from ex-Yugoslavia, a lot of people are coming there. It's quite a mixture of the cultures. Yeah. So if anybody will come to Slovenia, he should call me. I will take you around.
We're all coming, okay? We're all coming.
Why not?
You
Why
better
not?
get a big bus.
No
Okay.
problem.
Okay, brilliant. And
Welcome.
I think we go to Ava now in New Mexico, and Ava's interestingly a real estate broker. For me, that's an estate agent, of course. But Ava, I understand the property market's gone absolutely crazy in America at the moment.
Yes, it is absolutely crazy. It's interesting to see how people behave when the pressure is on. But coming to the whole cultural aspects of this all, I like what Murvet, you were saying, that the Danes don't get offended and Estonians don't get offended either. It's almost a bad form to bring too many emotions into a negotiating situation. Also, I like what Gregor said, the mistrust is always there. When you go to negotiate with Estonians, you start with negative trust. There is no, you have to start building up trust. They don't give you any leeway, and they're very rational. They don't talk a lot, and they will not explain their decision-making process to you. So they leave the emotion out of it. But the good thing is that they can give it. They are, I think, borderline rude when it comes to negotiating, but they can take it as well. And you don't have to worry about offending anybody. Americans, very different. They get offended so easily, and it's most of my job is de-escalating the emotions, and especially now when we're working with buyers in this market. De-escalating the decision, the emotions in the process, and guiding the public to trying to at least bring a little bit of rationality into decision making when they are negotiating in the real estate world. But yes, Americans are way more emotional, and Tim, as you said, no haggling. It's a set price, that's what we pay. And surprisingly, I'm married to a man whose father is Italian and mother is Austrian. So he is from a very different cultural background, and he haggles. We go to a general grocery store, and if he finds bad fruit, he'll go and look for the manager. He's going to negotiate the price, which to me is not offensive. To Americans, it's offensive. Like, his family will disappear and disown him for this, but I don't really care. Let's leave the emotions out of it, right?
Well, we better get to you and Tim back on in a month or two's time and talk about the USA property market, because 101, that's called gazumping in this country, where you offer more than the asking price, £101,000. But these aren't realistic numbers, presumably, are they? You know, in the UK, you look at the yield you can obtain on the investment if you were letting it out. So it's interesting how things have gone absolutely.
Well, there's part of the reason, Derek, is that there's a lot of people coming from California where they sold their house, a small ranch, for millions, and they come here and they can buy a much bigger home with a pool, possibly even greater amenities, for $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, and so they just bid because they want that. They've never dreamed of having that. They're moving from 1,400 square feet to 4,000 square feet.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And they'll have a lot of money left over. Is that correct, Ava? Are you seeing that?
Well, we'll turn to Gibraltar now, where you're lucky to actually get a postage stamp just by the airport to watch the airplanes taking off, or the RAF tornado. So I don't think it's an RAF base anymore. Gabie, are you there?
I am indeed. Negotiating in Gibraltar, it really does depend on the company that you're negotiating with. So it is very much relationship led. And as I said, because there are only, the last I heard, it was 29,000 people that live, inhabitants of Gibraltar. I believe they also ship in 10,000 Spaniards on a daily basis to work there. So it does depend who you're negotiating with, and it's very much around the relationship. So in my experiences, when I was working with Gibraltarians, I built up the relationship. I knew them. I would go in at the price and they would pay the price. Didn't have to do any haggling at all. but I would also refer business to them. So there was very much that kind of reciprocity going on. However, if you went to the gaming companies, and I've just read Nigel's question, you know, the gaming companies, they had people coming in from all over the world working there, and they were tight, very, very tight. They wanted you to work for peanuts, basically. So you would go in, if you went in too high, they would just say no. So you'd have to reduce the price to a level that was slightly above what your walkaway position, and be prepared to ski down. Whereas in Malta, where Gibraltar and Malta are very strongly connected because of the shipping, historic shipping, in Malta, they are much more Arabic in their way of negotiating. So they play hardball, and you go in high, and you've got to be prepared that you're going to come down at least 50%. And then once you've agreed what you want, and you sign the contract, then they do, I think you call it, is it nibbling?
Nibbling, yeah.
Nibbling, so it's kind of, okay, this is what we agreed. But seeing as you're going to be over here, can you just bring the book? Oh, and can you just give this? And can you just do that? And with no extra charge. So the Maltese, I found really, I really had to hold my nerve, because there's no emotion, to go back to what your other speakers are saying. Whereas in Gibraltar and in Spain, it's much more emotional, and it's an emotional way of buying and selling.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks. I've got to ask you this one though, because Spain was going to close the border over Brexit with Gibraltar. We heard a lot about that, didn't we? And
you can't believe everything in the news, though, Nigel.
No, I know. 10,000 people crossing the border every day, and that's. Do they have to walk across the airport as well? And still, wow.
Yep. They've built the tunnel, that allegedly is going to open by the summer.
Oh, okay.
Maybe next year.
Oh, I quite like walking across the airport. I've never walked across a runway before. And talking about that, I played hockey with Mike Williams in Gibraltar. I gave him a lot of passes, but he never scored a goal from all my fantastic passes. Mike, are you there? Are you going to tell us about negotiating in the Middle East?
Well, I remember negotiating with you who's going to buy the next beer, but that's a different story, I think.
It would have been you, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got the list here. So Middle East, the Gulf. Well, I guess you'd imagine it to be a bit of a souk mentality. So I think it's sort of endemic, I think, this tendency to want to negotiate things. And I agree that you tend to pitch a little bit higher than you need to allow room for maneuver. But it does differ, though, because as I said earlier, there's a mix of nationalities. And I think in Abu Dhabi, for example, you're probably negotiating with a business owner who comes from Jordan or Lebanon, and their approach tends to be slightly more direct and harder nosed than perhaps it would be dealing with a Gulf Arab. The other thing to say is that very rarely do you get to negotiate face to face with the principal, the owner of the business, particularly if it's owned by a local Arab from the GCC. So you'll be negotiating with a second ranking person who's quite prepared to say, I don't know the answer, and refer. There's no sort of macho negotiation, because there's always a point of referral to the owner. And one of the struggles you have is that very rarely do people like to say no. So you go through this process of inertia when you're waiting for an answer. And it's just in the nature, just rather than offend people, they prefer to delay and defer, and actually gradually you'll get the message after a few weeks that actually it's probably a no to this. So you have to find a way of doing that. The only other bit of advice I can give is, if you do get to negotiate with the principal, you stand a better chance if you've got a strong relationship. And I think this is at the heart of building business in the Gulf. It's a very personal basis, and it doesn't happen quickly. And they hate people flying in and flying out trying to do deals. You've really got to be there and amongst them, and they get to know you, which in some ways makes it easier because you're negotiating on a personal basis. But they're quite apt, quite inclined to say to you, you know, I trust you, you're my friend, you know, you've got to give me a good deal. And if you think this is a good deal, and it sort of throws the onus back on you occasionally. And that sort of personal dimension is quite a difficult one to understand. But it's the longer you do it, the easier it gets. But it's quite a fun experience, really. So what else can I say? I think it's probably enough gendering.
Patience, Mike, is the thing, isn't it? Patience. I don't think I got my fair share of patience when I was born, but I know you've been very patient out there. There's a few questions in the chat box, but can I thank all the guests that have come on today as well in the usual way? Before we go to the questions, thank you in the usual way. Claps all around, please. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to look at the questions, and anybody else wants to throw a question in, put your hand up, and I'll finish the interview in a minute, and then we'll stay on. But Nigel's asked a question, general question to the guest speakers: is there much difference when working with countries bordering different countries and companies? For example, Scandinavian countries share similar cultures, yet Finland is so different. Is there any sort of large change in any countries that you've been to? Gregor.
Yeah, I would say that we have all the time some such an issues with Croatians. Yeah, so we are neighbors. 80% of the Slovenians go to Croatia to the seaside, but we can never find an agreement. Not a political agreement and all these other things also. Yeah. But we have nothing against the Croatia, and it's a beautiful country. And of course, opposite, they come to Slovenia for skiing, but politically, we cannot find a solution.
That's interesting as well. Yeah, and you kept out of the dreadful war, didn't you, in the Balkans? Did you manage to keep out?
Yeah, actually, these troops, Yugoslav troops, came through Croatia to Slovenia, so they didn't stop them. They allowed them to go to Slovenia. So that was also one of the dispute, not the dispute, but what I would say what is in the brains of Slovenia, which they will never forget. Yeah.
Okay. Some people are leaving. Leave if you have to. See what else we've got in the chat box. John.
Derek?
John.
Yeah. Derek, just with regard to different countries, there's no better example than France. You go to the north, you hit Belgium. There are two nations in Belgium. One is French speaking, the other one is Flemish speaking. They're completely different in the way they negotiate. You go a little bit further, just 50 miles up the road, you hit Holland. Much harder Flemish speaking negotiation. You go, okay, over the channel, we hit Great Britain and Ireland, another completely different form of negotiation. Go south and you get hit Spain, much more well-organized form of negotiation, a bit like the Portuguese as well, quite different from the French. If you go to south, east, you hit Italy, a much more exuberant form of negotiation, quite different from the French. Now, I haven't forgotten Switzerland, which is more straightforward, organized, and then of course Germany, which is highly organized, rather hard ball, very little emotion, and of course you end up with almost say Denmark, and I'm not the expert there, there's Murvet who can follow on from that there.
John, that's really well. Thanks for that trip around Europe. I'm going to buy a rail pass and go around Europe. But actually, I've noticed that's one of the things that people that don't understand Europeans, or particularly Americans, come over sometimes, and not Tim or Ava that really do understand. They're more transatlantic than any of us in a way. But sometimes they come over, and I see there's a thing in the box about tipping. And I've noticed I had to put a couple of American friends of mine right when they went into a bar in the UK and asked for a beer without saying please, because bartenders in America get big tips. You can make a lot of money, can't you? You can't make a lot of money as a bartender in the UK. If you want to get served, then you better be really polite and nice. But yeah, lots of things there. And I remember being almost thrown out of a meeting, John, in Dusseldorf for being 2 minutes late, because that was a total insult to the Germans, and we've flown all the way from Heathrow for a meeting. But there we are. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us. Thank you to my guests for joining us. There's a wealth of information there, a tsunami of information that will be put on YouTube and put on the podcast. Thanks for joining us, and I'll turn the recording off now. If you're watching this on YouTube or the podcast, please like it, and stay on if you've got some more questions. Thanks very much to everybody.